All right, let's talk about that story and the day's news with our political panel tonight. We have Democratic strategist Tama Booker and Republican strategist John Thomas. Good evening to you both. It's great to see you. John, I want to start with you on this question of the U.S. negotiating peace efforts to end the war in Ukraine. The Ukrainians continue to say they want peace too, but they don't want to surrender. Why would, from their perspective, the U.S. be pushing a plan that amounts to surrender on some key issues?
Well, I think it's for several reasons. First, President Trump and many Americans want to see the bloodshed simply come to an end. This has been going on for, quite frankly, way too long. And it's also been a key item that President Trump campaigned on for re-election, is that he would bring this conflict to an end, bring peace. So, look, he's trying to force both sides so that they come to some kind of compromise. And compromise means that not each side's not going to be thrilled with the outcome, but it's better than more bloodshed.
Tamia, what do you think of that assessment? That this is about putting pressure on both sides to come to the table?
I think it's really hard when you have Ukraine has gone through what they have, right? And I think it's important to recognize that in this case, when they feel like, they're going to lose a lot more power and their sovereignty, it's understandable that they would be reluctant to this. They've been through a lot, right? And so I think right now what we need to do is understand that. And I think forcing it is too strong here, but I think there does need to be a point where there is some level setting and negotiation, but not where they feel like they have to give up so much.
Tamia, do you get a sense that there is still support here in the U.S. for continuing to support Ukraine?
Absolutely. I definitely believe that many people want to see this war come to an end, and many Democrats definitely believe that there should be an end to this. I mean, it has been awful for the people of Ukraine, and I think it's time for us to get to a point where this should come to an end for sure.
John, if we talk about the prospect of security guarantees, would the U.S. consider providing some sort of hard and fast security guarantee to say, if Russia were to attack again in the future, you would see a direct U.S. response?
I believe that's on the table, and that's, in fact, what might be required to ensure that Putin honors the deal. And if that's, what is required to bring peace, I think that's an appropriate response. I know that President Trump isn't thrilled about that kind of offer simply because he's trying to keep the U.S. out of any potential foreign conflict other than being a peace broker. But look, if that's what's necessary, I think the will of the American people will stand behind the president on this deal. And look, I'm quite frankly just encouraged that both sides now are finally coming to the table, discussing tangible talking points, and hopefully they can come to some kind of compromise.
They appear to be coming to very different tables. And John, I want to get your take on the question that I just asked Tamia. I mean, you said you think the American people would stand behind such a security guarantee, but how much of a priority is it, do you think, for Republicans right now to ensure that Ukraine's position is honored in any sort of peace agreement?
Well, I think it's a priority. It's a priority of the president, and therefore his party will likely get in line. Look, the president has campaigned on being a peacemaker. You saw it that he's working and he's made meaningful progress in the Middle East. He was rewarded here domestically for driving that agenda. And if the president came through with a deal that made common sense for America to help broker peace, I think the Americans will have his back on that.
Tamia, where do you think Democrats are going to stand on messaging on this? Because clearly, people want to see this war end as it's gone on for 3+ years, an incredibly brutal war. And President Trump is pushing forward towards a solution, whether it's a solution that the Ukrainians are happy with or not.
Well, one, we know the president does what he does best. He tries to push things on people and bully, right? So that part is frustrating. I think that's part of the messaging here, though, which is that in this case, for sure, that they actually need to be able to feel comfortable with where things are, where Ukrainians have been completely terrorized over the last couple of years with this war. They need to feel safe. They need to feel secure. And so we need to make sure that we are doing our part in ensuring that. So I think that's just where we're at with this, is that, yes, we do need to get to a decent place, but Putin can't hold all the power.
Okay, Tamia and John, stay right there. We're going to take a break and come back and talk about one of the big domestic stories today, a judge dismissing the cases against James Comey and Letitia James. We're back in a moment around the world and across the UK. This is BBC News. And let's come back to the story we covered for you a little bit earlier in the program. A U.S. federal judge dismissing the cases against the former FBI director, James Comey, and the former New York Attorney General, Letitia James. And John, let's start with you here, because the judge said that the prosecutor in this case, Lindsay Halligan, who didn't have prosecutorial experience previous to this case, that she was appointed unlawfully. What do you make of this?
Well, this is really disappointing outcome and certainly a setback for the administration. I believe they're going to appeal it to the Fourth Circuit. So, it's not completely over here. But I think what's going on here, and this is something President Trump has voiced his opposition to, is there's a rule called blue slip rules, which essentially gives veto rights to the home state U.S. senators in that given jurisdiction, which would be the Eastern District of Virginia, meaning there are Democrats as senators who would never confirm President Trump's pick for U.S. attorney. And so when whoever he nominated, unless it was a Democrat, likely wouldn't be confirmed by the Senate, which really was a rock between a hard place, meaning if Lindsay brought this case forward, she was going to run the risk of being overturned here. It's, again, disappointing, but kind of left with not many cards and not much of a choice, given the statute of limitations for her time that she was appointed. I think she had a mere hours to file this case.
Tamia, what do you think?
I mean, her being unlawfully appointed is already, to me, it's on brand with this administration, right? Like, there are people who are in all kinds of they're unqualified in a lot of high profile positions. So to see that, it was not surprising, but also relieving. The president has lately been, he makes it a story, a case for him to go after those that he perceives are his political enemies. And when people like the Attorney General, Letitia James, hold him accountable, then all of a sudden now he's trying to indict her. So I'm glad for the outcome. But also when you have a faulty process like this, it makes sense. So I'm grateful to see that this was thrown out in the way that it was.
John, coming back to you, you talked about the time that Lindsay Halligan had to prepare this indictment that she had brought forward. At the same time, the previous prosecutor, we understand, was dismissed, Eric Siebert, because he said he didn't have enough evidence to be able to bring this indictment, to bring these charges. Could it be that the administration simply doesn't have enough of a case here?
Well, I'm not definitively sure about that. Pam Bondi, who blessed this indictment, obviously believes otherwise. Then the line prosecutor who was dismissed also disagreed. Prosecutorial discretion is a point of contention in any prosecutor's office, whether it's the federal prosecutors, district attorney prosecutors. So there was a difference of opinion here. I believe the judge didn't rule on the merits of the facts of the case. It was more procedural in nature. So I'm still going to give the benefit of the doubt to the Department of Justice on the merits of the case. But it looks like if they don't win on appeal, statute of limitations will have run, and Comey and James will be off the hook on this one.
Yeah, Tamia, where do you think this heads next? Because the White House has said in a statement to the BBC as well, the last word on this has not been spoken.
Yes, I think they may try it again. They may try to appeal. I wouldn't be surprised given this administration and particularly this Justice Department. But again, I think they're just going to also find, even if they do procedurally do this right, that there's nothing there. There's no there. And that they just need to move on and actually focus on what matters to the American people, which is lowering grocery prices and making other things more affordable.
John, what do you think about that argument that President Trump, his administration, should move on, maybe focus on some of the other issues that Americans are more concerned about?
I think there's a good point in the sense that the president, with all these other things, whether it's foreign policy, potential violations of criminal law, does need to focus on the economic and domestic agenda. I mean, that's really an important thing. But at the same time, the Department of Justice is there to enforce the law. And if they found that there have been criminal violations, they have a duty to prosecute those things. But I think President Trump can't lose sight of the big picture, which our other commentator just brought up, which is, gas prices, grocery prices. I mean, those are very important. Home buying prices, that's arguably more important.
Okay, John and Tamia, thank you so much for your thoughts tonight.
Thank you.